and only experience with Bill Spurr. I was newly married, probably been married a year and a half to 2, and was visiting my mother-in-law on Bell Hill. And my husband and I had just left the house and we heard this racket coming up over Bell Hill. And this truck plowed into the driveway. And this man jumped out. And I was aghast. Ken sort of took it in stride. And what I noticed about him was he wasn't wearing any socks. And he was rather distracted. And he rushed by us. He did not speak. Rushed to the door. And I said to Ken, "Who is that man?" And he said, "Bill Spurr." So our next speaker is Celeste, who is going to talk about his ancestry and his will.
And I'm not an Otisfield native, so what I found on the internet. No, not really. I've got this genealogy down, and I've got some interesting things from his will. So. William Samuel Spurr, this is his obituary, which gives you a little feel of who he was. Died Sunday morning, April 24th, at the Litchfield Memorial Home at West Paris. He was born in Otisfield, February 28, 1883, the son of Llewellyn and Lydia Scribner Spurr. He was educated in Otisfield and Oxford schools and had been a mason and a carpenter. He also operated a cider mill in the area for many years. I don't know how much he drank. Mr. Spurr wrote and published the history of Otisfield up to 1943. He had traveled around the world, and Spurr's Corner, a part of Otisfield, was named after his family. Mr. Spurr had been a lifelong resident of this community. He is survived by cousins. Funeral services were at the Raymond Funeral Home in Norway, with his interment in Elm Cemetery, East Otisfield. The name Spurr comes from the English, which means figure of speech, for the occupational name of the maker of spurs. And this is from the Middle English, which was spelled Spore or Spur, I-S-P-U-R. He is descended from many of the early pioneers of New England. The maternal line includes the immigrant Robert Spurr, born in 1610 in England, who settled with his wife Anne Merrifield in Dorchester, Massachusetts, where he died in 1703 at the age of 90 years. He was a selectman, deputy lieutenant, and father of 7 children. Robert's son, Robert Spurr II, was born in Dorchester, Mass. in 1661 and married Elizabeth Tilestone in 1684. He was prominent in Dorchester as a selectman, lieutenant colonel, and took part in the Boston Tea Party and served in the Revolution. They had at least 3 children, including Captain Robert Spurr, born 1689 in Dorchester. He died in 1731. He married December 22nd, 1720, Jemima Foster, born in 1700 in Dorchester, Mass. They had 6 children. Their youngest son, Joseph Spurr Sr., as he's known, was born in 1731 in Dorchester and died in Otisfield, 1805. So they were the first ones to land in Otisfield. Joseph Spurr Sr. of Dorchester had married Miriam Lyon of Stoughton, Mass. in 1753. They had 10 children. He died in Otisfield, and she died in 10, I missed the number here. They were the 4th family to arrive in Otisfield on September 3rd, 1779. And there's a stone at Spurr's Corner, which memorializes their camping there when they first arrived in Otisfield. Their son, William, was born in 1765, again in Dorchester, and died in 1837 in Otisfield. William Spurr married Abigail Merrill Dole in 1789. They had 12 children born in Otisfield. Their son Samuel Spurr was born in 1812 and died in 1855 in Carroll, New Hampshire. He had a very severe accident when he was doing woodwork over there. Samuel Spurr and Laura Harding had 3 children. Llewellyn L. Spurr, the first child born in October 1844 in Otisfield. Llewellyn died in 1920. He had married Lydia Sawyer Scribner in 1882 in Otisfield, and she died in 1947. Their only child was William Samuel Spurr, our subject, born February 28, 1883 in Otisfield, and died April 24th, 1977 in West Paris. Many people thought that William had never been married. He's been married. He married Martha M. McDougall, August 8, 1925, in Center Conway, New Hampshire. Martha was born in 1906, so she was 19 years old, and he was 42 years old. The Florida Divorce Index states that Martha Spurr divorced William Spurr in 1927, 2 years later, in Palm Beach, Florida. William and his mother had a home during this period in Palm Beach at 525 55th Street, 2 blocks from the beach. Now it's an empty lot, but I'd like to have a walk. In 1971, Ralph Lamb, a cousin of Otisfield, was appointed the conservator over William Spurr. And the estate at that time was valued at about $180,000. 4 years later, in October 1975, Ralph Lamb told the court that he could no longer be the conservator anymore because of poor health. Robert Dow Jr., a Norway attorney, became the guardian until his death in April 24th, 1977. His next of kin was listed as cousins Alva L. Rogers and Lillian Connolly, both of North Wyndham. 2 other cousins, Ralph Lamb, Alice Lamb Bean, and Chester Lamb. Alva Rogers was the administrator of his estate. On July 16, 1979, the property was deeded to James L. Rogers by his aunts. In 1981, the estate was finally settled. Ralph Lamb and Alva Rogers were both dead at this time. Here comes the interesting part. Bequests from his will. $100 to the Elmwood Cemetery Association. The income to be used, when necessary, for cleaning of moss and discoloration from the Soldiers' Monument, using a solution of chlorinated lime and water, in the proportion of 1 pound of lime to 10 quarts of water. And I direct that nothing else be used on said monuments. The second request is $2,000 to the town of Otisfield. Income to be used for the care of 2 cemeteries on Scribner Hill at East Otisfield and Cedar Crest. The third request is $500 in trust to the Free Will Baptist Church. the income therefrom to be used to buy strawberry ice cream, peanuts, popcorn, and soft drinks for an annual Sunday school picnic to be held in August of each year in Joe W. Holden's Old Grove on the shore of Sanity Pond, preferably in company with the Joseph W. Holden picnic. The fourth request is $1,000 to the Free Will Baptist Church in trust for preservation of the roof and the exterior of the church building. Fifth request was books and papers. I give and bequeath to the Maine Historical Society and genealogical books and papers all of what they want of them. The sixth request is $5,000 to be added to the Lydia B. Spurr Ministerial Fund, now in the care of the town of Otisfield. And number 7, $15,000 to the town of Otisfield, interest, income therefrom to be used as follows. At the end of each year, the income from this fund shall be equally divided among any children born of parents residing in Otisfield, who have been given the middle name of Spurr, and it is so recorded in the town books. If no payments are paid in 1 year, the interest is added to the next year's. His homestead farm and land left to Lillian Connolly and Elba Rogers. He also left $10,000 to the Stevens Memorial Hospital. The remainder shall be divided between Stevens Memorial Hospital and the Maine Historical Society. So that's his life in a nutshell. I did want to just let you know a little bit more about his wife. As I said, she divorced him after it was barely a year or two in 1927. She eventually married a Jerome James Frank, who was a Jewish fellow, and he was 8 years older than she was. He was a chemical engineer in Massachusetts at MIT and graduated from there in 1920. He was born in New York. His mother lived at 15 Houston Street in Brookline, Mass., and his father was Charles Frank. Jerome's World War I draft registration lists. Did I have something for Jerome's registration lists him as being medium height and build with brown hair and eyes. He was a member of Zeta Beta Tau fraternity. In 1954, he became president of the Washer and Frank Company, doing business as clothing importer and manufacturer. And he was brought before the Federal Trade Commission for continuing to import and sell flammable wearing apparel in violation of the recently passed Flammable Fabrics Act. He dies June 19, 1976 in Framingham, Mass. And his parents were born in, his mother was born in Germany and his father in France. And he is buried in East Boston, Mass. Mary died 1997 in Framingham, Mass. She had one girl, Mary Elizabeth, with her second husband, and a son, Herbert Frank, born in 1934 and died in 1992. And when she was there, in that time, around 1930, he was a secretary treasurer at the wholesale ready-to-wear business. I guess she made out okay in the end. So that's William and his will and his descendants. putting a lot of it into, what is it that I use? Family tree, so that we can figure out some of the kids that are, because they all named everybody after the other one, and you have to figure out which one you're talking about. But it's not an official jingle, because I know somebody's got one, so.
So Callie and I have a couple of stories and some poetry. That can be the only way to hear that. And the first story is one that Jean Hankins gave me, and I'm going to read it from what she wrote because it's so well done. So, Jean's mother-in-law, Nellie, knew William Spurr very well because they'd grown up together in Otisfield. Even so, she was very surprised when in 1930 she received a wedding present from him, because he had the reputation of being a miser who didn't usually do that kind of thing. She remembered that he had once attended a bridal shower for someone else in town. Back then, it was customary to have what was known as a pound shower, where guests brought a pound of something. Bill Spurr had astonished even those who knew him when he gave the bridal couple a pound of sulfur, the cheapest thing that he could buy. Nevertheless, he had presented Nellie with a real wedding present. When she opened the gift box, she was pleased to discover it was a 2-pound box of chocolates, the kind that had 2 layers with a paper in between, dividing the two, but somehow she wasn't surprised when her fiancé, John Hankins, pointed out that the bottom layer had been removed.
That's miserly.
And now Callie has a story.
Well, let's see. I have a couple little things. I personally do remember Bill Spurr quite lively in my brain. We used to see him at the Otisfield General Store when we go down with our dad or mom or whatever, and Bill would wander in. And as I recall him, he was tall, quite tall actually, very thin at that point, and he always had on about the same outfit, and I have to admit, Jean hit on part of it. No socks. That didn't matter what time of year. So he was tall and slender, and he had kind of high water pants. They didn't quite come down to top of the shoes where a gentleman would wear pants. And he had bare feet and legs, half tucked way up. And they were always quite dirty, I have to say. So I don't think cleanliness was a real practice of his to the end of his life. He was fairly elderly then. And he always wore men's trousers, not jeans, but wool pants or regular pants, a white shirt, open at the throat, and a dark colored, not a sport coat, it was like the top of a suit. And that's how he presented himself. I don't know if that was similar to
the day that I started, that's just what he was wearing.
The other thing I knew to be true about Bill Spurr was that he liked to go spear suckers down on the sucker brook down here. It runs through the old fields of this farm abutting here. And we used to go down and watch the salmon run in the spring and come up the stream and jump the dam here at where the old mill pond was, because there was a dam there. But we'd go down and we'd find Bill Spurr often spearing suckers. And the story was, and this was from my dad, who knew Bill pretty well, was that they speared the suckers and then took them home and canned them and ate them. And so in some places in his mother's diary, she talked about having suckers and potato, etc. for dinner. So that was kind of a staple maybe, and it was practical because you didn't have to pay for them to go down and spear them. So that was also a little story about Bill Spurr. Then a really quite an interesting piece about, this sounds a little bit like kind of a plain and simple man, But in 1923, Bill Spurr took a trip to Europe all by himself on a steamer. He left out of New York, and this was January 13th, 1923, on the steamer Lapland, and went into Antwerp. And somebody told me probably that was cheaper than kind of the New York to Paris type way of getting to Europe. He went third class. He said it was good enough, and that the grub was also quite good. He was in a large stateroom with several other people, 4 berths and a window so he could see out. The other fellows were interesting. The first one to show up was a cowboy from Wyoming, so I think that makes kind of an interesting match. But a fellow from Maine and a cowboy from Wyoming. He talked about playing a game he didn't know before called 1 and 5. I've never heard of 1 and 5, but he talks about it several times. And they get together in their room and do a little gambling, not high-level stakes, but they would play cards. And the first evening he played, he won 95 cents. Went to bed at 9 o'clock. And he talked every day in his diary. And I have this little diary here. And you can come up and take a look at it afterwards if you want. But it's all in pencil and in his writing. And he writes every day about how many miles, I suppose nautical miles, they traveled. And the first day out, they went 345 miles. He describes, now remember this was January 13th in the North Atlantic, right? He talks about the first day, January 14th, as clear, pleasant day, not cold or windy. Really? In January in the North Atlantic, perhaps, I guess.
Well, he wore no socks.
Yeah. Hopefully he wore socks then. I would hope he did. And he said the waves were up to 15 feet high, but mostly 8 to 10, but it wasn't very exciting. And so he goes on a couple of days and then played cards again, and this time he won $1.37 playing 1 and 5, whatever that was. He was playing with a German, a man from Switzerland, a Belgian, a Spaniard, and the Western cowboy. So it presents an interesting picture. There are only about 28 third-class passengers on the ship. And it's the same people that I just listed, German, Swiss, Belgian, Spaniard. In addition, in that small group of 28, there was a Russian, a Dalmatian, an Italian, a Greek, an Armenian, a Frenchman, and an Englishman. So they had a very, very mixed population, very cosmopolitan, yes. But on the next day, he lost 50 cents playing pitch, which is another game they played. And, he talks when the ship really rolled when they went across the Gulf Stream, and a little bit of this and that, and he was headed for Antwerp. The ship was to land in Antwerp. So I counted up the days, and it was a full 9 days across, if that sounds about right. I really don't know back then. It was a steamship, so it wasn't sailing. But he eventually arrived in Antwerp, and then made his way to Paris on the train, and ended up in the Gare du Nord, if you've ever been in that elite train station. And he had quite a good time, I think, in France, and did things. He went to the Louvre and talked about the paintings and the sculptures and how interesting they were. He went to Versailles, saw the rooms of Louis XIV and Marie Antoinette, and he went to something he called I think it was a botanical garden. He didn't call it that, but he wandered through the botanical garden. He talked about walking on the Champs-Élysées and promenading around, watching the pretty French girls. He commented on them. And he really kind of did the town and spent quite a bit of time in the art museums just poking around and having a good time. And he was there until February 18th. So he left on January 13th. So he was there about a little over a month.
So what year was this camp?
1923. And he would have been, I figured that out when Celeste had a group, he would have been about 40. So he was a young man,
I'm just wondering where he got the money for the track, but his father died in 1920, is that right? I think that's what Celeste said.
Yes.
So,
He didn't-
yeah.
He didn't seem to lack for resources, but he didn't hesitate to take advantage of a good deal. He talked about riding on the train, maybe when they went to Versailles, I remember. And he ran into a Frenchman on the train. The man could only speak French. And Bill didn't know any French, so they really couldn't communicate a lot. But the Frenchman took pity on him, I guess, and shared his supper with him. And his supper consisted of bread and wine. So he had bread and wine on the train with the Frenchman. But he saw all the things. He saw the Arch de Triomphe, and he saw the Eiffel Tower, and Winter Notre Dame, the big cathedral, went to Versailles. He was staying in a hotel in Paris, so he'd travel off during the day like you would. And I think he went back up into Belgium to explore. And then on February 18th, he left for New York. This time he went from Cherbourg to New York, and he upped to second class. And his ticket for the steamer across back to New York was $130.46. Not too bad. And it was interesting because we've come across the fact that we wondered where this man's money came from. Because we didn't know what he really did for a living, but we understood that he did have stocks, and Jean came across that information. Really interesting stocks. It wasn't just by GE. He really had a portfolio that seemed to be fairly intelligent. And while he was in New York, he did go to the stock exchange and watch them in progress, doing the bidding and taking and whatever. So that's kind of the trip. Now, and he did speak in his journal towards the end about buying some silk kerchiefs and a little bit of jewelry, and I wondered if that was for to bring home to his mother, or he didn't say what he was going to do with it, but he did make some gift purchases, and he talks about writing cards home and keeping in touch. So that's what I know about his trip to Europe.
So we shall move on.
And do I have the next piece too?
You have the main album, you're the one.
Yes. You've heard awesome pieces of Bill Spurr, but my Uncle John Hankins, Gene Hankins' father-in-law, wrote this lovely little book of poetry. He was an English professor at the University of Maine, and he was obviously a fairly good poet. And so he writes, there are some wonderful poems in here about people. Jim Jordan, for instance, for some of you old-timers, there are other characters here, but this is about William Spurr. So this is a good synopsis of his life. William, or Bill, was odd, even for Maine, where everyone's a little pixelated. We are not called the maniacs for nothing. Wholly indifferent to what others thought, he went his way, pursued his own concerns. In youth, William was wed. After a year, his wife sued for divorce. Took him for plenty, yet he remained a sentimental soul. He used to fiddle, write, sing love songs, expressing all the longing in his heart. He was a miser. When my wife and I, here's the chocolates, were wed in Bell Hill Church, he planned to give a box of chocolates, decided that might be too much, and he removed the upper layer and set the lower layer for our use. Our daughter married there. The rites were performed by an Episcopal bishop. Our friend Bill questioned, argued with him half an hour, that his regalia must be Roman Catholic. No Protestant would wear such gaudy robes. Bill had a head for business, bought stocks early, which multiplied in value many times. If you think about it, he would have been right after World War II, with the elevation of the economy, the war effort, and all of that. So he bought stocks early, which multiplied in value many times. He loved to travel, sailed around the world, made winter trips to Florida, spent money, but sparingly. He did not believe in waste. Half blinded by glaucoma, he became pitiful in age, lived all alone, unable to wield the axe. He scraped up leaves to feed his fire, ate little food or none, became obsessed with fear of poverty. Bill was our own town historian, wrote the best of histories and published it himself. His father Llewellyn fought at Gettysburg, So Bill gave to the town a veteran statue, the pride of our local cemetery, and that's the Civil War monument at Elmwood Cemetery on the Center Lane. Bill's will was like his life, novel, amusing. He left the house to his 2 cousins, money to several friends, a fund to buy ice cream for church school picnics, strawberry it must be his favorite flavor. Nothing else would do. He left a moderate sum for church repairs, and since he was the last of the local Spurrs, he left a legacy for each newborn child, whose middle name was Spurr. The rest of it to the Historical Society of Maine. What different motives move the human heart, what different interests activate our lives. The ludicrous, the noble are combined, and everyone, especially so in Bill, the friend and benefactor of our town. And before I let Jean have it back, if you look in your town report, you see that list of the children who made middle name is Spurr. And to date, there are 12 of them. And I shared this with Polly Bartow, and she remembered that there was a young man, Adam Young, who was the first recipient. They were about the same age as her, Jonathan, so she remembers it clearly. He was the first one.
19, what date was that?
1980. That was the first one, because as you pointed out, his will was not settled and dispersed for quite a while.
That's from 1981, I thought.
That could be. That was Polly's remembrance. And then Adam's sister, Rachel, also was a Spurr. She was Rachel Spurr Young, and she was 4 years later, in 1984. So you can always check in to see if there are any new. The most recent was in 2015, and it's Kadin, K-A-D-I-N, Spurr Hall. So that's that.
We're going from Uncle John's poetry to Bill's poetry. So he wrote a very, very long poem, many stanzas long. So I decided to share the first and the last stanza. And as I read it, think about, we really don't know much about his education. How did he come up with all of this? I mean, it's amazing when you think about it, not just the poetry, but all the other things that he did. So here's Bill Spurr in his own voice. Deep in the covert of a shady nook, close by the margin of a pebbly brook, as stones throw from where 2 highways meet, one was a crossroad, one was the village street. Stanfield schoolhouse, dear to many a heart, by time and fame long sundered far apart. Now, this is the last stanza. I wasn't going to put the whole thing. Sport on, glad thought, I'm reeking Tilda's tears, and heartaches that may come with after years, when still increasing knowledge shall impose increasing burdens for a taste of life's woes. Be joyous now while life-clad morn is new, and we old boys look on and envy. Notice anything about the poetry that strikes you. Remember this, we don't know anything about his education. There's a definite rhyme scheme, right? Nook, brook, neat, street, high. Anything else you notice about it? Janet?
Well, his rhythm is perfect, which is really hard to do. If you've ever tried to write a poem like that, it is not easy. And also, the sentence structure is extremely complex. So even if it's not my taste in poetry, it's kind of sentimental. That's really impressive use of the English language. And also the vocabulary is very sophisticated. So I was really impressed. If he didn't get a lot of formal education, he must have educated himself somehow to be able to write.
And we can't seem to solve that mystery. How did he accomplish what he accomplished with what we know about him?
What did you say, Celeste, about education? Didn't you make some reference to it?
I don't think it.
Oh, okay.
I do.
But he went to school in Otisfield and Pottle.
Yeah.
Shirley?
Do you know what age he was when he wrote that poem?
I got a feeling
I don't think we
he
do.
must have done a lot.
No.
Yeah.
No, it was just,
Well, he wasn't a youth by the language he's talking about.
Right, it sounds like he's older than the 40.
Yeah, the last
Been
line,
Europe and back.
the last line, and we old boys look on and envy you, so to speak.
I feel like he's read a lot somehow. He read
Yeah, he must have.
books.
Well, don't forget, Gene's gonna talk to us about his writing.
Yeah.
And history, so, and we can have some more discussion after Jane talks with you a bit, so I think we'll pass it over to,
And that's the next portion.
to Jean. Talking about the history of Otisfield.
But he's on the roster and everything.
Be careful.
Do you want to chair him all?
Now, I'm gonna stand up for this, okay? This is just to make everyone feel sorry.
No, so you won't fall.
Bill Spurr wrote 2 books. Most people know only about history of Maine. How many of you own the history of Maine? I am impressed. If any of you don't own it, I think you can still buy it for $35 in your Otisfield town office. And also you can buy Hankins Index. Well, no, because I have food story. Okay, the first book, it's really more important in a way than the history because he had to write this one first. This is Otisfield, Maine, vital records, births, marriages, deaths. Not exciting reading at all. Almost every town in the state of Maine has one of these, but somebody has to put them together. And it was Bill Spurr. And I think I don't know if he got paid for doing this, I doubt it. But he could not have written this if he hadn't written this first. I think Tom Peacock has found errors in his sources in this, but it's still a pretty impressive job, and we refer to it a lot. This is out of print, it's very hard to get. I think the Historical Society has 2 copies, and we're not letting anyone have either. Okay, well, I'm talking about the history of Maine, of Otisfield. I'm going to talk about Bill as a historian. I don't know about you, but I'm interested in history for the stories in history, for the narratives. I want to hear about the exciting stories of battle in Bunker Hill and the siege of some Greek island. That was good stuff. I wasn't particularly interested in biographies of people. But for the first historian of Otisfield, was not Bill Spurr, it was Grenfell Holden. I've already lectured on him before. Grenfell Holden was writing in 1870, and he was the one who collected everything. Just in the second half of Bill Spurr's book, this much of this book comes most of it comes from Grenfell Holden, who wrote down the stories. He was close enough to the first settlers, so he knew their sons and their children. And they, of course, would tell him about their family. So he was going right back to the early beginnings, which is Celeste account were right after the Revolution. Okay. But for Grenfell Holden, who put together all his biography, history was biography. That was what was important to him, to remember all these old people. That's all he did in his history. Spurr adds something to this. He's not interested in narrative, telling a whole complete story. He's interested in biography, but he's also interested in documents. So the first part of this book, if you go through it, the first part is on the proprietor's records. The first 20 pages are taking excerpts from the proprietor's records of Otisfield in the early days of Otisfield. The second part has to do with more proprietors records. He goes into town meeting records. He has excerpts from town meetings up to 1940. He has a section of church records. Now, he only talked about 2 churches, but that's all the records he had. Talks about the Baptist church and the Congregational church and the Baptist church. Doesn't talk about the other churches that once existed in Otisfield. We know nothing about them because he didn't talk about them. He must have known there was a Universalist church, there was a Methodist church, there was even an Advent Christian church in the 20th century. Not a word about those from Spurr, only 2 churches. And just not good history. Okay. Then he talks about, has a section on schools, the whole same sort of thing. Excerpts from records. Excerpts from town meeting records, from school records. Another section on mills and groceries, retail stores. That is a little more, he contributed a little more to that because he didn't have exact records, but it's very dull, really account, chronological account. This person started a store, this person started a store, and so forth. So just cut and dry. It doesn't tell you much about the store. Okay. Stores and mills. Okay, the virtue of this. The virtue of doing it that way is that he does not prejudge history. He doesn't comment on it. He doesn't accept. When he gets into the genealogy section, he does comment. He is there, but I'll talk about that. What this can be about, this first part of the book, this is the real history. The first part of the book is the history documents. What does he leave out? Okay, these are some of the things he leaves out. Demographics. We have no idea how big the town is, who came, when they came, how it changed. We have no idea if the population dropped precipitously in the after 1850s, not in his book. One doesn't get any sense of group decisions or meetings that leave no records. We hear nothing about the anti-slavery movement, a movement from statehood. That's not in the book, except maybe incidentally, but not much. He doesn't talk about the Masons. He doesn't talk about the Grange. And those were important institutions in town. He concentrates on the churches instead, and the mills, and the retail stores. Nothing happened in the 20th century. There were some town meetings, there were some soldiers, but nothing else. Does not mention the Finnish immigration in the 1910s and 1920s. He talks about some Finns, but not why they came, or when they came, or where they settled. That is important. Doesn't mention the summer camps. That's hugely important. Otisfield Fair. Where's the Otisfield Fair? Not there. Mrs. Elliott's library, which was in that back room, not there. This building, not there. The Jolly Times Pavilion, here, not in the book. Okay, I want to talk about his writing style, which is one of his, he leaves lots of things out. I want to talk about his writing style, which I like a lot. He is a good writer. He appeals. His appeal is he's sparse. He doesn't use flowery prose. He doesn't exaggerate. For example, when Grenville Holden writes about Stephen Knight, Grenville Holden says he was one of nature's noblemen. Well, what does that tell you about Stephen Knight? Here's what Spurr says about him. A little on. He was a tall man, over 6 feet, and very powerful. He had a large stone in his urn, and no one but himself has ever lifted. his initials are common. You know something about Stephen Knight and how strong he was. That's a terrific. Okay. He had the wisdom in this genealogy section to, as I said, to copy Grenville Hall, everything Grenville Hall wrote, almost everything. I think everything's in here, plus more, including those stories. Grenville Holden really liked those stories about people. The stories about people really don't tell you much about the person, but they're wonderful stories. And some of them bear repeat. Spurr did a beautiful job of reproducing them almost the same way, except better than Grenville Holden. The Grenville Holden, as I said, was flowery, not Spurr. I'm going to read you two. I don't want to overemphasize these because Spurr is a lot more than these stories. The one I like best. You've heard this before, but I'm going to read it again. I'm going to ask you, what does it tell you about Jonathan Britton? This is under Jonathan Britton. One day, Enoch Turner, Henry Turner, and Mr. Britton were out fox hunting with dogs. Captain Britton was alone by the side of the road with his gun when a stranger who was riding past asked him, "What are you doing with your gun?" "I am a member of the Otisfield Fox Hunting Club," said Mr. Britton, "and on duty." "What luck?" asked the stranger. "Good," replied Mr. Britton. "When we get this one and two more, we will have three." Now, that's the kind of thing you do not want to lose in your history. It wasn't very. And that's one reason we want you here tonight, to give us any stories you have. We want to get them back. We want to record them. Okay, here's another one. This is a little different sense of humor, but the same Spartan language. He's talking about Leonard Edwards. He lived at the corner of the road in Numbertown, where his son Levi did. The house has since burned. He went barefoot most of the time. One day, when he was hauling up some wood to the house, which he did about every day, as he never got up more than he burned from day to day, one of the oxen stepped on his bare foot and stood there jamming it into the mud, so Leonard could not move it. After a moment, he said, "Get off of my foot before I strike you."
That'll do it.
That one throws up. Okay. And that's about all I'm going to. No, I'm going to say a little more. He talking about his Spartan style. Sometimes you wish he would say more. This is the genealogy section. John Syer, I wrote a whole paper about it. This is what he has to say about John Syer. Syer, John, son of Jonathan, he married October 4th, 1792 in Gore, had a daughter of so-and-so and so. He went insane before 1812 and had to be kept in a cage. He escaped in 1820 and went to Bray and did some damage for which the town voted to pay $7. He was on the town for many years. That's it. Sometimes his personality comes through a little too much. He's not, he's usually neutral, but he had some prejudices. Didn't like to spend money, of course. Didn't like the town to spend money. And he also got upset that people were leaving town. That comes through. In his history, he would say, they went west but had a bad time out there. Or he's very disparaging about anyone that leaves. Doesn't talk about the ones who went west and got rich, no. Here's the one he wrote about the schoolhouse where the town office now is. that building. There was a lot, this is written around 19, he's writing about, this book was published about 1950, just before 1950. There was a lot of controversy over the location of a new schoolhouse in East Otisfield. Dr. Elliott offered to give a lot beside the community hall, it was right there. But a certain clique wanted to build on a lot it land owned. There were 3 special town meetings about it, but the clique finally prevailed and paid FM $250 for this lot and built a schoolhouse there. And I'm going to finish with that, but we would like to hear your stories. We would like to hear your stories about the Spurr. We've got Virginia Noble, who's house. If they're good enough to tell.
They're not good stories, no. No.
Okay, there is that problem, I understand.
Yes.
Yes, occasionally, yes. Yes, got a story.
Yeah, I'm, when
Wait, why do you up here? I'm going to go sit down, yes. The floor is yours.
No, okay. I'm Glenn Henderson, I live on the Green Road, just up the road from the Spurr Farm. My son Troy sitting over there is now the owner of the Spurr Farm. And I got to know William Spurr when my mother-in-law was taking care of him for several months. When he could no longer stay at the farm by himself. Doc Johnson took him in for several months. I don't know the exact length of time. And she made sure that he was as clean as he would let her get him. And ensured that he had 3 meals a day and whatnot. He was losing his eyesight at the time, and he had dentures, and he refused to put any money into getting them relines where they go all the time, and just to drive my father-in-law crazy. Ralph was the one that coordinated the care with my mother-in-law, and agreed to pay her $100 a week for full care. And William never knew that because Ralph said that if he ever found it out, he would be in big trouble. So that's. I do know that my wife and her twin sister used to steer his car down the road when they were little tykes, and but he always treated them with ice cream, strawberry. And I picked up this thing. My son was doing some remodeling on the place, and this came out of it. It's slightly burned. I don't know how that is, but this is a piece of wood that came out of the farm, and those are the nails that they used on the joints. So I'm assuming that they were handmade. He had a little blacksmith thing in the corner of the building that has since fallen down. And because there was coal, lots of coal there spread around on the floor. So I just thought, well, I'll bring this down, and said that it would make a nice barrette for holding your hair. Thank you.
Well, before you disappear, I remember, I don't know if I remember it myself or remember my dad talking about it, that there was a tremendous big spring up behind the house.
Yes.
Water spring.
Yes.
And Dad said that they somehow had funneled that into the kitchen.
Yes.
And so when you approach the counter, you could lift up this flap, and here's the barrel of spring water bubbling away.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it went down and out under the building, I suppose, somehow, and there was a big barrel out at the road.
Yes.
And the water bubbled, and the most beautiful water.
Yep.
I and my horse used to stop to drink there together. As did Judy Bean and her horse.
And a lot of the piping was lead pipe.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so smart.
Yeah. And the spring still exists. up in woods, my son Troy has,
Which one's Troy?
come across it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Troy.
So, it still exists up there, and you'd be surprised the distance that he piped that water.
Yeah.
Tremendous distance.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he dug the trench by hand. Yeah. I do know that he was an avid reader, so that may help with explaining his education before he started losing his eyesight. I first met him in the 60s, and when we were home on leave, occasionally we would either pick him up from a bus trip to Florida or take him to the bus station so he could ride. And pretty rough looking individual.
Yeah. There was another interesting piece in some of the material that's in the Historical Society. There's quite a bit on Bill Spurr. There's several diaries of his and several diaries of his mother. When he talked about, Gene said he had the first car in Otisfield.
Yep.
And he used that, he earned money with that. He drove people around. And he took them to Lewiston or Portland or Norway or Oxford or whatever. So he kind of provided a taxi service in a sense. And he has a little record book that says who he took, where he took them, how much it cost. $5 or something to go to Portland or whatever.
He used to keep the car in the, what was the middle barn, the one that's still standing there now, that my son uses for his stuff. Yeah. I will tell you that my wife mentioned this just today. She was going to come tonight, but she's not feeling well. He despised the name Bill. He preferred and would let you know it's William. I don't know if any of you had ever heard that or not. Thank you.
Well, is great, isn't he?
Has anyone else got a story about Bill Spurr?
William.
Where was ours? William Spurr. Did he have a middle name? William Samuels.
I have a certain follow-up of his that Callie's father used to say that he once went to the Spurr's house to consult with William Spurr, and he went up to the door. Mrs. Spurr, his mother, was there, and he said, "Is Bill around?" She said, "There is no Bill here."
Now we know. So if there are no more stories, we will thank you for coming and sharing your stories about William Samuel Spurr. And I believe that Jess and Derek have provided a wonderful little snack back there of hot chocolate and get into the Festival of Holiday a little bit with cookies that she's been busy making. So thank you very much, everybody, for the board, for your hard work. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next year.